Good evening, and welcome to the 2022 Pennsylvania in the Spotlight Republican Candidate for Governor debate. I'm Scott Lamar, the host of Smart Talk, a daily radio program on WITF Public Radio in Harrisburg. Tonight's debate is sponsored by Spotlight PA in partnership with the Philadelphia Inquirer, Trib Live in Pittsburgh, Penn Live in Harrisburg, WITF in Harrisburg, and the Pennsylvania Cable Network, PCN. The event is hosted by the Eisenhower Institute at Gettysburg College and is being held at the College Union Building Ballroom. In partnership, a special thank you tonight to our other supporting partners, the Pennsylvania News Media Association and the Pennsylvania Women's Forum. And the Pennsylvania Now, before we get to the rules of the debate and introduce the candidates, let me introduce you to the president of Gettysburg College, Robert Giuliano.
Thank you, Scott. I'm Bob Giuliano, the president of the college, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to our historic campus for tonight's Republican gubernatorial debate. At Gettysburg College, our history is deeply entwined with a defining moment in American democracy. Tonight, we're gathered together to reflect on an important electoral moment and to have the opportunity to hear leaders from across the Commonwealth articulate their vision for the future. On behalf of the entire college community, let me thank the candidates for joining us tonight. And I'd also like to thank Spotlight PA, PCN, those in attendance, those watching at home for joining us for this special occasion. Thank you and welcome to Gettysburg College.
And now I'd like to introduce Christopher Baxter, who is the Executive Director and Editor-in-Chief of Spotlight PA, our organizing sponsor. Chris?
Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Christopher Baxter, the Executive Director and Editor-in-Chief of Spotlight PA. I want to again welcome you to our first Pennsylvania in the Spotlight 2022 primary debate. Tonight's event is a historic milestone in our state. For the first time in Pennsylvania's modern history, an unprecedented coalition of the state's largest media outlets have joined forces to ensure as many voters as possible can hear directly from those who seek to represent them. Collectively, tonight's sponsors reach millions of Pennsylvanians in all corners of the state and are each committed to deep public service journalism. For those of you who are not familiar with Spotlight PA, we are an independent, nonpartisan newsroom dedicated to investigative and public service journalism about the Pennsylvania state government and urgent statewide issues. Our mission is to hold powerful public and private forces to account through urgent and compelling reporting that empowers voters and drives positive change here in the state we all call home. Our unique brand of journalism is made possible by people like you. So today, more than 3,000 folks all across our state support our work financially and make events like today's debate possible. I want to thank all of Spotlight PA's members all across the state for their deep commitment to local news in Pennsylvania. You can learn more about Spotlight PA by visiting our website, spotlightpa.org. Thank you to all of the candidates here tonight who have agreed to participate without preconditions. I want to again thank our host for tonight's event, the Eisenhower Institute here at Gettysburg College, and all of our partners. And with that, I'll hand it back to our moderator, Scott Lamar, to get our program underway. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And you can see the candidates walking to the stage now, and we will introduce them as they get onto the stage. We're going to have the candidates behind the podium in alphabetical order, and I'll give them just a second to get to their podiums before we introduce them. Our first candidate on your extreme left is Jake Corman. By the way, I should tell our audience that we ask, you can applaud after the candidates are introduced, but during the debate itself, we ask that you not respond to answers that you hear or applause. So Jake Corman is our first candidate. Joe Gale, Charlie Giroux, Melissa Hart, and Enche Zama. Now, let me go over the rules for tonight's debate. Candidates are allotted a 60-second opening statement and a 30-second closing statement. Most of the debate is divided into a series of topics, each beginning with a question posed to a specific candidate, followed by each of the other candidates answering the same question. Both the moderator, me, and questioners are permitted to ask follow-up questions. Candidates must wait to be asked a question by the moderator or a questioner, or to be called on during open discussion before speaking. We will alternate which candidate answers in what order. In other words, if Jake Corman gets the first question in the second round, Commissioner Gale will get the first question, and we just go on down the line that way. Candidates cannot interrupt or speak over other candidates or the moderator or questioners. Candidates who are directly criticized during open discussion are allotted 30 seconds to respond, but only after the moderator calls on them. Now, let me introduce the journalists who will be asking the questions tonight. These two journalists, to my left is Evie DeJesus with Penn Live, and to Evie's left, my extreme left, Scott Blanchard with WITF. Now, the candidates will have 60 seconds to make an opening statement, and again, the order we will go left to right. So let me start with you, Jake Corman, 60 seconds for your opening statement.
Thank you very much. Is this on? Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, and welcome to the Be Not Afraid debate. I want to congratulate my other colleagues here for having the courage to actually face journalists and the public and answer questions. And speaking of having courage, I've made a career in my public service of taking on the big issues, whether it's taking on PSEA and getting public pension reform done, whether it's taking on the big bad NCAA and when they went after Penn State and defeating them, whether it's taking on Governor Wolf and making sure that his craziness of shutdowns and mask mandates were defeated. No matter what the issue was, no matter what the political thought, I was always courageous enough to go on and take on the big issues. And to me, the big issue facing our next governor is just this biggest one, and that's personal freedoms. And I wouldn't have said that 2 years ago, but over the last 2 years, we've seen a governor say who had an essential business and who didn't have an essential business. We had a president of the United States, President Biden, who said, take this vaccine or you're fired. I mean, this isn't President Putin, this is President Biden. And if we're going to have a free country, we have to be free even during difficult times. And so as your next governor, I will do everything I can to make sure I protect your freedoms because everything else is based on that.
I have to stop you at that. I just want to let our audience know that if you see the signs here, yellow is 10 seconds for the candidates. You can see these, right? Okay. 10 seconds for the candidates and 60 seconds. Okay. Just wanted to make sure that you all had good eyesight, too. That's a big thing for voters. So, Joe Gale, let's go with you next with your opening statement.
Good evening. I'm Joe Gale, and I'm a pro-life, staunch conservative from the Philadelphia suburbs. I'm not supposed to exist, but I'm now a two-term county commissioner. And what drove me to run for Montgomery County Commissioner back in 2015 was the Montgomery County Republican Committee endorsed a board member of Planned Parenthood, the Republican Party. And I was raised as a conservative pro-life Catholic, and I was appalled that the Republican Party would do that. And I got fed up with the do-nothing, weak Republicans that always let us down. And I decided to run unendorsed against the party establishment, and I won and was considered the biggest upset in Pennsylvania in 2015. And I was reelected by a bigger margin in 2019. And I am positioned in such a way that I'm the only Republican that can actually defeat Josh Shapiro in the general election, because I have the geographic advantage of coming from his home base. We're both Montgomery County commissioners together. That's where I developed a lot of personal relationships, name recognition, and tremendous appeal to independents that play a key factor in general elections, because I'm not a generic Republican, I'm a unique Republican.
Stop. Okay. Charlie Giroux, 60 seconds.
So great to be back here at Gettysburg College, where I taught once upon a time in the business department, and so happy to be on stage without a safe space that some of our fellow competitors seem to have. I'm not afraid to debate anytime, any place, and frankly, if we can't debate each other, how the heck are we going to take on Josh Shapiro in the fall? I'm a Ronald Reagan conservative. I began my career working for President Reagan, worked for him on and off for 25 years, and today I am the vice chairman of CPAC, so my credentials are well burnished in that regard. And as other Republicans choose to take on each other, I'm taking on Josh Shapiro. The day that he announced his candidacy, I called on him to resign because I don't believe that anybody should be taking a taxpayer check to try to move up in office while our jobs and our people are moving out. So I am Josh Shapiro's worst nightmare. I am an outsider who knows what's going on inside. I am a businessman, not somebody that's taking a government paycheck, and I am a patriot who's not afraid to fight and who will take on Josh Shapiro every single day.
Thank you. Melissa Hart, 60 seconds.
Good evening. It's great to be with you, and please bear with me. I'm coming off a bout with laryngitis. I am a former member of the U.S. House and a former member of the Pennsylvania State Senate who chaired the State Senate Finance Committee. I tell you these things because I do think experience in government is important in order to be the governor of Pennsylvania, because there's a lot of things wrong with the state, and having that inside experience, I know where to go to fix it. But more importantly than my service in the public sector is my last 15 years since I left the United States House. I'm an attorney in private practice in Pittsburgh area, and I've worked with small businesses and medium-sized businesses over the last 15 years. I also am on the board of directors of a small business lender. And I tell you this, focus on small business is important because Pennsylvania will not grow unless we pay attention to the job creators and entrepreneurs of the Commonwealth. Our small towns will not grow if we don't have Pennsylvanians building back our economy. And I look forward to speaking with you about the rest of the issues this evening.
Thank you. And finally, for opening statements, 60 seconds for Enche Zama.
I'm Dr. Enche Zama. I'm a retired cardiothoracic surgeon who arrived in America with $20 in his pocket at 14 years of age. I've been in the leadership position in the most complex industry in America, healthcare industry, for decades now. I'm running for governor because I want to be a governor for our children. Our state is dying, it is sick, and it needs a doctor. And I believe I'm the ultimate package deal. I'm a physician, I'm a PhD chemist, and also with a degree in management from Harvard. And I've espoused nothing but excellence. And I believe in high performance teams. Our state is rotting, is totally mismanaged in many ways. It's rotted in every pillar of our government. And I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me here. Even though I've won most of the caucuses north of I-80, I'm still being shouted out and away from the stage in the debate that's coming up next week. But if Pennsylvania is looking for somebody who can win in November, I'm that candidate who can win in November, and the ultimate package deal.
Thank you. All right, now that we've finished with the opening statements, let's get into the issues themselves. And Scott Blanchard is going to ask the first question. And remember, candidates, you have 60 seconds to answer this question. And let's see, we will go first to Joe Gale with that question.
Joe Gale, high inflation, high gas prices, and the lasting effects of the pandemic have Pennsylvanians focused on the economy and where public money is most needed. Pennsylvania has $2.2 billion in American Rescue Plan money that must be distributed by the end of 2024. What are your priorities for how that money should be spent and why?
I believe that it's a wrong philosophy for government just to spend money because they have it. I think they waste a tremendous amount of money, including with the handling of the COVID-19 response from the federal level and the state level. And just because there's a pot of money doesn't mean that the county government or the state governments should spend it. It should go back because it's our money, it's our tax dollars. And the best relief to what the crippling response to the COVID-19 pandemic can be is to lift us up by letting us actually operate our businesses, letting us go to work, and stop these lockdowns, shutdowns, and mandates and vaccination requirements that are crippling our economy in Pennsylvania. So I don't believe we should just spend government money just because we have it. We should save it and spend it wisely, and just to spend it to get rid of it is not a good idea. I would not support just blowing money that we don't necessarily have to spend.
So just to clarify, you're saying you would send that money back to Washington?
I would give it right back to Sleepy Joe Biden.
And same question, though, for Charlie Giroux, how to spend that money.
Well, let's be clear. One of the reasons we have hyperinflation right now is because of the Biden spending that's gone on over the course of the past couple of years. And that's why it's impossible to buy groceries at any reasonable price. That's why it takes a mortgage to juice up your car every morning. And I believe that the taxpayers' money ought to go back to the taxpayer. So I would propose a one-time tax credit for the taxpayers of Pennsylvania, because after all, it's their money. Government has no money on its own. It's their money. And in the alternative, I would use that money to provide for roads and bridges so that we could have a temporary rollback, underline temporary, of the gas tax. Because I think that if we used it in that way, you could give citizens some relief when they go to put gasoline in their cars. I think that's where we ought to do it, taking the relief directly to the people of Pennsylvania.
Tax credit, Charlie, I want to be clear here. Tax credit, does that mean a check going to Pennsylvanians? Or
No, a tax credit on their state income tax.
Just wanted to make sure. Okay, let's go to Melissa Hart next.
One time.
One time.
And I'll bounce off that one time. The issue, I know that the governor has proposed spending a lot of the American Rescue Plan money on increasing education funding and things that obviously we won't be able to sustain after those monies are gone. I think doing anything like that is a mistake. So there are needs that the state has. And being from Western Pennsylvania, I'm acutely aware that one of those issues is roads and bridges. I think it's important for us to maintain them. So I would use some of that money to make sure we address the roads and bridges that have been rated for a number of years in poor condition, which is a dangerous situation, as we've learned, for Pennsylvanians. I do believe also, though, that when there is money available, that is a big problem for the United States when it is just spent and spent. And obviously, that's a big reason why we have such a significant jump in inflation at this point in time. So I wouldn't encourage just spending money profligately, but I would endorse one-time necessary projects.
And let's go next, same question to Enche Zama.
I consider myself a conservative, compassionate, critical thinker. We spend money when there's no money, and we don't spend money in addressing problems in a sustainable manner. Right now, in Sullivan County, in Warren County, in Bedford County, there are mothers and fathers who did not have access to health care during the pandemic. Right now, in Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and in Punxsutawney, and places like that, in Potter County, there are children who were totally disconnected from the educational web during the mismanagement of COVID. We need to spend that money to provide reliable, outstanding broadband to those communities. And also, the women who've been on the front line of COVID, lost jobs, unplanned pregnancies, and absence of child care have led to significant poverty among our women. We need to address that with this revenue.
Jay Corman?
Thank you. What I wouldn't do is what Tom Wolf and the Democrats are proposing, which is a 16% increase in our state budget, which is completely unsustainable and put us in the same position as Ed Rendell did back in 2008. What I would do is do some of the one-time spending that we did do, which was helping nursing homes get through the pandemic process and do the upgrades they need. Helping hospitals recruit and retain nurses. That's an extreme problem for Pennsylvania, is the lack of skilled nurses. What I would suggested also is use it for the gas tax, to lower the gas tax. You know, I met a woman from Lancaster, Pennsylvania at the Allentown Farmers Market who travels back and forth every day. Now imagine what that budget, her family budget, has gone through with this doubling of gas prices around the country. And so using this to get us through a period of time during this emergency, hopefully things will calm down over the next few months, but this would allow us a few months to use this to give real relief to families who need it the most. That's what I would propose to do.
That gas tax relief you're talking about, would that be a one-time thing, or would that be permanent?
It'd be short term. It'd be 6 months. You could do it over 6 months by removing the state police funding out of the gas tax, which I want to do permanently anyway once I'm governor, but remove the state police funding, fund it through the general fund because there's a surplus of money in the general fund, and then take that loss of dollars and put it into reducing of the gas tax.
And when we talk about state police being funded by money that was meant for infrastructure later on in tonight's conversation. I want to move now to Evie DeJesus of Penn Live. First question will go to Charlie Giroux, and Mr. Giroux, you have 60 seconds to answer this question.
Thank you.
Charlie Giroux, a pending lawsuit could upend the way Pennsylvania funds schools. Plaintiffs in the case say the state has violated its constitution in failing to maintain a thorough and efficient public education system. Local real estate taxes account for a high percentage of the money spent on public education in Pennsylvania. That means wealthier areas are able to raise more money to spend on schools. Do you think Pennsylvania meets its constitutional obligations with regards to school funding? How would you change school funding?
The case is going to come down very shortly, and it's going to have significant repercussions all across the political landscape in Pennsylvania. And I think it's going to require us as a state to confront something that we should have taken on long ago. There are two aspects to the answer to that question, in my judgment. One is real school choice, and the other is a serious and meaningful discussion about the school property tax. For all of my political life, we've heard we got to get rid of the school property tax. But the minute anybody comes up with an alternative plan, and I've often said if you asked all 253 members of the General Assembly, you get about 312 different answers. As soon as we come up with an answer, there's tremendous opposition. So we've got to recognize that ultimately there's going to be a burden shift. And when we acknowledge that fact, then we can get down to real solutions. And I'm going to propose to the General Assembly a specific package to get past what we currently have, where senior citizens in particular are disproportionately impacted.
Thank you. Melissa Hart, same question, 60 seconds, about education.
If all we're talking about is funding, I believe Pennsylvania spends enough money on public schools. Our failure is what we charge them to do. Right now, public schools are being asked to be basically the purveyors of mental health care, the purveyors of daycare, the purveyors of all kinds of different challenges, or covering all different challenges that families across Pennsylvania face because the kids are in school. Schools should be responsible for education. If there are other services necessary, we do have other departments in state government that can bring them on site. But that should not be the responsibility of the education funding. I believe that we do need significant education reform, actually even outside of the funding area, although I would move away from property taxes toward sales tax. But we must focus and give parents the opportunity to homeschool. We must give parents the opportunity for real school choice, both public and private. We must also offer better charters and more opportunity for parents to be the ones who make the decisions.
All right. Let's go to Enche Zama. Question about school funding.
I believe in school choice. Also, the problem that we have with our educational system in Pennsylvania is what I refer to as zip code disease. And it's really relegated to certain geographies of our state. But it affects all of us. And so I think mothers, fathers, parents need to have skin in the game. Also, we can't look at education just in isolation. Our curriculum, our kids need to be learning things like coding and financial analysis, and we need to give the option of vocational schools. The point I'm driving at is to be able to address this cost issue, we need other sources of revenue. And as governor, I will open new markets for Pennsylvania's great products, energy and agriculture. The revenue flow from that, in addition to eco and medical tourism, will be able to offset some of the challenges that we have in funding education, and we'll be able to relieve the burden of property taxes on our most vulnerable. We got to look at it holistically.
Jay Corman?
Yeah, look, Pennsylvanians, we're setting records in funding of our public education, and we've done it all without raising taxes. Pennsylvania citizens are in the top 10 of funding education per student nationwide. But you know, this court case, which I'm actually a defendant in, I disagree with completely. This is a job of the General Assembly and Executive Branch. And we passed a fairer funding formula with a Republican legislature and a Democrat governor, nearly unanimous. So, no, I 100% disagree with this case. This is a job for the legislature, not for the courts, to impose a dramatic tax increase onto people of Pennsylvania, which they would if they get involved in this case. So I would 100% disagree. Where we need to go in education is empowering parents. Empowering parents either at the public school level or empowering parents to make a decision where their kids should best go to school. Is education about the school or is it about the child? I believe it's about the child, and we should empower parents to find the best environment for their children to succeed.
Okay, I think I know what you mean by empowering parents when it comes to school choice, but empowering parents in the traditional public
Absolutely.
school.
Look, we passed a bill in the legislature, which of course Governor Wolf vetoed, which I would sign, which would force school districts to put their curriculum online so that parents could know what's being taught in their schools, so they could get an idea of if they approve it, disapprove it, go to the school board and advocate for one position or another. Empowering parents to be involved in their child's schools or education is the most important thing we can do as public policymakers.
Franklin and Marshall College poll last week found that 70% of those who responded, and that includes both Democrats, Republicans, as well as independents, didn't like the idea of parents being able to sue a school district over a curriculum or something they agreed with.
Well, first of all, I don't govern by public polls. I govern by what I think is the best thing to do. In empowering parents to be involved, I didn't say sue, I said be involved. Okay. Be involved and being able to be part of their school district, knowing, so they know for sure. I think one thing COVID showed us is when we opened up the veil of some of the schools, parents weren't too happy. This gives them empowerment to be involved in their child's education, which they absolutely should have the right to do.
Joe Gale?
The track we're on with public education is simply not working. I've met thousands of parents across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania that are not pleased with the education their children are receiving in schools, many of which are pushing indoctrination. Their children were forced to wear masks for 2 years, and they've had enough of it. And until you restore the power back to the parents through school choice, where we need a voucher system, where the dollars follow the child to a school of their choice, whether it's private, parochial, homeschool, cyber school, charter school. So these public schools have no other option but to shape up and get it right. Because once they start competing over those funds, you're going to generate competition. And that's basic economics, and improves quality and also drives down costs. And you can't have property tax reform until you drive down the costs. That's the root of the problem. School choice would drive down the cost of education, and then finally, provide relief to our senior citizens that are being taxed out of their homes. This current path is not sustainable. We must have school choice.
Thank you. Let's move on to our next round of questions, and Melissa Hart will direct this first question to you. Scott Blanchard?
Melissa Hart, Republicans in the state legislature are pursuing changes to election law they say will fix problems revealed in the 2020 election and restore confidence in elections. But yet we know there is no credible evidence of significant fraud or problems in Pennsylvania's 2020 election. Judges, including some appointed by former President Trump, found his campaign's claims of fraud to be without merit. And those debunked claims largely sparked the doubts that lawmakers often cite for why fixes are needed. What changes to state election law do you support? And given that the state's election system has been established as free, fair, and secure, and under that system, Republicans were reelected to majority control of the legislature in 2020. Why do you support those changes?
Melissa Hart?
So I was a member of the state Senate when we had one of the biggest frauds ever in Pennsylvania. A state senator used the then absentee ballots and basically lied to a sector of the community that was not English speaking in the city of Philadelphia, and they called it La Nueva Forma de Votar. In other words, they told people there was a new way to vote, and they basically voted for them in Philadelphia, electing a guy who was later removed and sent to jail. They used those paper ballots that looked just like the kind of ballots that the legislature for some reason allowed when they allowed no excuse mail-in voting. I oppose no excuse mail-in voting. I would repeal Act 77 because it does open opportunities for fraud, whether you can prove them or not. They have placed significant doubt in the integrity of our system. We need to repeal that part of it. We need to repeal early voting and start where they started before Act 77 was instituted. And the only change I would make is requiring voter ID.
Why would you repeal early voting? What do you have in mind?
I believe that early voting is, again, helps to contribute to the questions that people have about voter integrity. Look, I'm not even sure why the legislature decided to move Act 77. We didn't have problems with our election system. So as far as I'm concerned, as a person who's been volunteering on elections since I was 18, we didn't have a problem. So I would like to repeal what created the questions, which is Act 77, go back to the drawing board, and let's help ID voters by requiring everyone just to show an ID before they can vote.
And Zama?
Well, nothing undergirds democracy as we know it than somebody's right to vote. Every Pennsylvanian's vote must count. As governor, I will make sure that everybody's vote counts. I'm the only one on this podium who's lived in a socialist totalitarian regime where your vote didn't count, where democracy was an extraterrestrial concept. Where there's smoke, there's fire. Now, just like in medicine, if you die, if there's an untoward outcome, what do? An autopsy. And so I believe that the questions about election integrity should be investigated concertedly to be sure that everybody's vote counts. In the final analysis, I believe that we need to go back to our Constitution and where the provisions, exact provisions for mail-in ballot are. And also, I believe in voter ID, low-hanging fruit.
Time. Jay Corman, 60 seconds.
I find the question interesting because, Hillary Clinton still says that she was robbed of her 2016 election, and no one asked her for any evidence of this. Stacey Abrams, the governor of Georgia, still claims that her election was stolen from her, and no one seems to ask her for any evidence. I guess only if you're a Republican. And I would disagree with your premise. All you have to go is look at Lehigh Valley. Lehigh Valley district attorney said there were far more ballots dropped off at a drop box than there was people who visited the ballot. That's fraud. Now, to what level, we don't know, but that is fraud. Philadelphia, they did a right to know request to get the video evidence of the drop boxes. They were supposed to keep it for a period of time. Well, we don't have it. So look, our job as policymakers is to make sure moving forward that we take any ability away for fraud and make the substantive changes we need so there isn't any fraud. Getting rid of drop boxes will go a long way, and that's why later this week I'm going to introduce my voter integrity plan, which I think will go a long way to restoring confidence in the elections in Pennsylvania.
Scott has a follow-up.
Can I just follow up with, I don't know if the mic went off, but to follow up with the Lehigh Valley situation, the investigation there did say that it was most likely not fraud, that it was most likely just somebody dropping off a ballot for their spouse.
They didn't say
so just
that.
to correct the record, they did.
They
so
did
just
not
to
say
correct
that.
the record.
And by the way, if you drop off more than one ballot that you're allowed to drop off, that is fraud. Now, again, I'm not sitting here to say to what level it is, but when you have far more people dropping, or far more ballots casted than dropped off, and the district attorney said, now he decided not to prosecute it because he couldn't figure out what level of scale it was, but clearly, if you drop off a ballot that is not yours and you don't have an assigned affidavit saying you can do that, that is voter fraud, and that's what happened.
It's illegal. It's not necessarily fraud, as the people investigating.
Sorry,
it.
just
correcting the record, just standing up for the facts here.
Either way, I think people are as concerned about illegality as they are fraud.
Would there be, okay, you're saying more than 50 courts have decided that Joe Biden won Pennsylvania. Do you disagree with that?
I'm not here to dispute that. Look, again, Hillary, how many times were the Democrats asked did Hillary Clinton, was she rightfully elected? Will they ever ask that question? That's not the point. The point is us going forward as the next governor is who's going to put the right measures in place to make sure that we don't have illegal casting of ballots or voter fraud. That's what I'm going to do as the next governor.
Even though there is no evidence other than what you cited.
Well, clearly there is. I just cited it. We have a Lackawanna County video.
Would it have made a difference in any race?
What's that?
Would it have made a difference in any race?
I've never made that accusation. I've never made that claim. What I'm saying is we need to make sure people have confidence. Our governor's first lady voted illegally. I'm sure it was innocent. I'm sure that's fine. We need to make sure that nobody votes illegally, whether they're doing it innocently or not. That's the problem. That's what we need to do.
Joe Gale?
I'll tell you what's fraudulent, that we've had 4 elections, the primary of 2020, the general election of 2020, and the primary general of 2021. We're about to have another one on May 17th. of elections in Pennsylvania that are conducted under unconstitutional voting guidelines. And that was determined 2 months ago by the Pennsylvania Commonwealth Court. And that's because of Act 77, the unconstitutional mail-in voting legislation that gave Pennsylvania 50 days of no-excuse mail-in voting. That's the longest vote-by-mail period of time in the nation. And the blood is on the hands of the Republicans and the legislature. Every single Republican state senator voted for it. And they did it because it was a trade-off. They said to Wolf, we'll give you mail-in voting if you allow us to remove straight ticket voting. Because they know that the removal of straight Democrat selfishly benefits Republicans down ballot. That's been proven. And that's all they're worried about is keeping their seats safe seats. And Doug Mail-in Mastriano, who likes to parade around like he's Mr. Restoring Election Integrity, is a total fraud, and he's part of the problem. And I call him out on it, and he's afraid to face me on the stage.
Charlie Giroux?
I disagree with the premise as well. And the problem that I have is that if there's one fraudulent vote cast, it cancels out the vote of a law-abiding citizen who did it properly, and that simply cannot be accepted. As governor, I would move immediately to ask the legislature to put a bill on my desk to repeal Act 77, because it is on its face unconstitutional. Furthermore, I would make sure that we have a Secretary of State who is both someone experienced in conducting elections, but also someone absolutely committed to the rule of law, to the Constitution of Pennsylvania, and to not changing the rules in the middle of the game, to not moving the goalposts constantly, to not saying one county can have one set of rules and another county can have another, because ultimately, if we don't trust the count, there are no winners. And we absolutely, positively have to restore election integrity because it is at the core of our democracy.
I'm going to move on to the next question, Evie DeJesus, and this question goes to Enche Zama.
Dr. Zama, the U.S. Supreme Court is considering a case that could overturn or weaken Roe v. Wade. Almost 24 states are poised to ban or significantly restrict abortion if Roe v. Wade is overturned. Texas has already banned abortions after roughly 6 weeks of pregnancy, and at least 3 states are positioned to pass laws banning abortions after 15 weeks of pregnancy. If elected governor, what will you do with legislation restricting abortion access if it reaches your desk, and why?
First of all, everybody in this audience is pro-life. And the mere fact that we're here today, somebody had to make significant sacrifices in many ways and had a vested interest in our lives. I've been protecting human lives my whole life. I've been saving lives my whole life. I am pro-life. I believe that life begins at conception, and if life begins at conception, that baby ought to be taken all the way to the end of the spectrum to delivery. And any intervention within that spectrum is wrong. And it's really, if life begins at conception, whatever you do to stop it, whether it's at 6 weeks or 16 weeks, it's murder. So I do not believe in any provisions that fail to protect a child in the womb. And I will not sign or support any policies that seek to terminate a baby. We cannot be wishy-washy about human lives, because nobody was wishy-washy about any of us sitting here today.
Let me follow up on that, though. When you say you would not sign legislation that
supports abortion.
Okay, what about the other way? If legislation came to your desk that restricted, like some of these other states' laws, 6 weeks, 15 weeks?
Absolutely no abortion. Protect human life.
So you wouldn't even put a time limit on it? Abortion would be completely illegal.
Who are you? Who am I to determine when to terminate a human life? Only God makes that decision.
Good, Evie.
Dr. Zama, would you make any exceptions for cases of rape or incest?
Not rape or incest, because that's still an innocent baby. Remember that every mother, every woman who's committed an abortion carries a significant psychological burden the rest of their life. As a physician, I get to see that, and the rest of us go home. It's wrong.
Jay Corman?
Yeah, I'm pro-life. I'm pro-life. I do believe that life begins at conception. As a majority leader, I was honored enough to shepherd through some very important pieces of legislation dealing with banning some grotesque procedures like dismemberment, which is akin to me to partial birth abortion, just something that is just grotesque and should never been allowed to begin with. I voted for an updating the Abortion Control Act, which is based on viability of the baby outside the mother's womb, was set by KCV Planned Parenthood. We updated it to deal with the technology of today, the baby's viability at earlier weeks. And so I've always voted pro-life, will continue to pro-life, and I would sign legislation such as that with the exceptions of the life of the mother and rape and incest.
These other laws that sets time limits, Texas 6 weeks.
Well, look, I mean, these are hypothetical. We got to wait to see what the courts allow us to do. And so you got to wait to see what the court decides. We don't know where the U.S. Supreme Court is going to be once they make their decision. But clearly, as I said, I'm pro-life. I've never hidden that, very strongly pro-life. I believe that life starts at conception, and we should protect the most vulnerable among us.
Joe Gale?
I am an unapologetic pro-life conservative, and I pray that Roe v. Wade is overturned and the power is restored back to the states. As the next governor of Pennsylvania, no innocent life will be murdered under my leadership. And if I have to hold Republicans in the state legislature accountable to stop abortions, I will do that, including support primary challenges against other Republicans that will drag their feet and resist it. There's no gray area when it comes to life. Every innocent life deserves to live, and we should not murder innocent unborn babies. You can't be any more vulnerable than an innocent unborn child. And we have a moral obligation as human beings to protect life. God creates life. It begins at conception, and no ifs, ands, and buts about it, no gray area. There should not be innocent life being murdered in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
Any exceptions?
Absolutely no exceptions. I value all life.
Charlie Giroux?
I'm an unapologetic pro-life candidate as well. And as an adopted child, you can tell and know that I feel particularly strongly about the issue. And I hope and I pray that the Dodge case will allow Pennsylvania to make the very decisions you're talking about. And yes, I would sign the fetal heartbeat bill. Yes, I would sign the Down syndrome bill, both of which Governor Wolf vetoed. And let me say this, Josh Shapiro is the one who's truly radical on this issue. He doesn't want less abortions. You know, safe, legal, and rare has gone right out the window with him. He has said abortion is health care. He has said he wants more access to abortion in Pennsylvania. He believes that more abortions is somehow better public policy. I completely and totally reject that, and I would sign the legislation that you suggested.
Melissa Hart?
I believe you have uniformity among the candidates on our pro-life beliefs. But one thing you don't have among the candidates is someone who's been successful at advancing pro-life legislation through her career. As a state senator, I have been both a successful advocate for unborn children and for moms. I sponsored the Safe Havens law, which has saved over 1,000 infants in Pennsylvania, which allows a distressed mother to drop her child at a police station or hospital and save that child's life without being charged with abandonment. I sponsored the personhood bill, which made both the mom and the unborn child victims of a crime if someone perpetrated a violent act against them. I did the same in Washington with a bill that became law called Lacey and Connors Law, and I also sponsored the partial birth abortion ban. I look forward to the opportunity as governor to work with Pennsylvanians to explain and understand that if we want to be a humane state, we protect mothers and children.
Thank you. All right, let's move on to the next question. Scott Blanchard, and this goes to Jake Corman for 60 seconds.
Jake Corman, a recent record-setting wind auction off the East Coast, car makers moving toward electric vehicles, and companies proposing and building solar farms across rural Pennsylvania are all signs of an energy transition toward renewables. What should Pennsylvania do to help fossil fuel workers and communities that rely on fossil fuel jobs successfully navigate any transition toward renewable energy?
Well, if we're interested in dealing with climate challenges, we need to bring manufacturing back to Pennsylvania, back to the United States. We do it far better with far better regulations, far environmentally safer than any country in the world. And look, I hate to break it to all the people who are strong supporters of the renewables, and that's great, and we should do what we can. But we're going to be using fossil fuels for decades and decades to come, because the renewables don't create even remotely enough of energy to fulfill the needs of this country. And so if we want to bring jobs back to Pennsylvania, if we want to protect the environment worldwide, not just here in Pennsylvania, we need to bring manufacturing back to Pennsylvania, use our natural resource, natural gas, to create jobs, to improve the environment. That's what we could do. That's why I'm 100% opposed. I've been fighting Tom Wolf, trying to get us in this regional greenhouse gas alliance, which is horrible from so many different perspectives. If you want to improve the environment, bring manufacturing back to Pennsylvania so we can use our natural gas, which is a much cleaner fuel.
I just want to clarify, Senator Corman, when you say bringing manufacturing back, that last part you mentioned about using Pennsylvania natural gas, you're not talking about manufacturing windmills, for example.
Well, that's manufacture whatever you want. I'm happy to manufacture windmills. What I'm saying is we need to convert our natural gas, not just be an exporter of natural gas, which can help some of the world problems and get rid of some dictators like Putin, but we need to convert natural gas into product, as we're doing with the Shell cracker plant, as we're doing with Nacero, converting natural gas into gasoline in the Northeast, which is a cleaner gasoline, again, improving our environment. This is our opportunity to really improve our environment and create jobs here in Pennsylvania.
Joe Gale?
Our nation should do everything possible to become energy independent. Frankly, we should not rely on foreign nations that hate us for energy, and that's what's happening. And Pennsylvania can lead the way to reach the goal of energy independence. We have an abundance of God-given natural gas right under our feet, and it's literally untapped potential, and we should fully utilize the natural gas industry in Pennsylvania. We have so much of it, we can actually export it to other regions of the world. We can lead the way. It creates thousands of new jobs. It will drive down utility costs, and it will also keep us safe. It becomes a national security matter when it comes to our natural gas industry. We cannot rely on foreign nations to supply our energy. We have to do it here in Pennsylvania. And to think that we don't tap into our natural resources is mind-boggling. That's common sense, and I would do away with any regulations that hinder that. We need to tap into it.
One of the issues, one of the challenges we face with exporting natural gas is that Pennsylvania doesn't have enough pipelines to do that, to get it to a port where it can be liquefied and sent overseas. What do you do about that?
We need to grow our natural gas industry. We need to build pipelines all across Pennsylvania so we can export it and benefit our economy and benefit our residents here in Pennsylvania. So part of the natural gas boom is also building pipelines. That's how you transport it. And also could be liquefied. So it's untapped potential. We need to utilize wind power, windmills, electric vehicles is not the solution. That's just politics. We need to fix the problem, and we can do it by tapping into our natural gas industry.
Charlie Giroux?
You know what we can do for Pennsylvania workers? Drill, baby, drill. Because God gave us trillions of cubic feet of natural gas underneath the surface of Pennsylvania. And that has already led to an incredible number of high-paying jobs, to decrease costs for consumers and their home heating bills and other things, and to a resurgence in manufacturing. Look at what's going on out in Beaver County with the cracker facility, which already is ringed with manufacturing concerns that are going to make plastics out of the wet natural gas that's being cracked out there. I'm going to be a pro-energy governor. That means natural gas, coal, nuclear, wind, and solar. Not to the exclusion of any of them. We can be all of those things. We can be energy independent. We can protect our national security by not buying our energy from people that hate us, and we can create more Pennsylvania jobs, more prosperity for all Pennsylvanians, and lower costs for every consumer.
Melissa Hart?
We had a particularly cold month this winter, and I think most people noticed that because of the constrictions on our natural gas production placed there by this current governor, people saw their gas bills spike, and a lot of people had a hard time paying them. As governor, I would make sure that we connect what we need to connect to make sure our natural gas industry works. As a lawyer in the private sector, I've worked with farmers in the western part of the state to make sure that they can yield income from that property they've had in their families for generations and are no longer making money on as farmers. We have to be realistic, but we also, I believe, by developing our gas industry, will benefit Pennsylvania across the board. Small town manufacturing can return only if energy is affordable. If we're producing a significant amount of energy here that we have, if we connect those pipelines and we make sure that our ports are equipped for export, you're going to see prosperity across the state, not just in the energy industry, but also more opportunities in small towns where we have people experienced in manufacturing and can rebuild.
Enche Zamo?
I'm going to be the governor that brings common sense and pragmatism to energy. People are just tired of the schizophrenic policies from our government when it comes to energy. When you think about energy, you need to think about it three ways. One, the economy. We can grow it. We have tremendous resources. Two, humanism. People need affordable energy and reliable energy, and we have that beneath us. Number three, the security imperative. And you mentioned the trace elements. A lot of our cobalt comes from China. The largest amount of lithium for our batteries comes from Chile and Africa and places like that. So you see the security imperative in that. And we have hydrocarbons beneath us. Let's use them. I'm all for clean energy. I want us to be #1 in clean energy research. I want Gettysburg College to be right there in that forum with it. But it's not ready for prime time. And as we know, the climate summit last November, afterwards, people realized it's not ready. If you eliminate hydrocarbons, you shut down the entire healthcare industry.
Time. All right, we're going to break things up a little bit. We kind of had this plan for the end of our conversation tonight, but we'll break it up a little bit. We call this a lightning round, and the only difference in the rules are you have 30 seconds to respond to this. And our first lightning round question, and Joe Gale, you get this question, is you can ask a question of any of your opponents tonight. Ask a question.
Well, I would ask a question of one of my opponents that's not here tonight, and that's Doug Malin Mastriano. And I would say, what nerve do you have to think you can run for governor when you voted for the unconstitutional mail-in voting legislation, Act 77? Because in my opinion, anyone that voted for that disastrous legislation should be disqualified from holding office, let alone being promoted to a higher office. And I hold him accountable that he's part of the problem when it comes to election fraud, election integrity, and every doubt people have in our elections. So I would ask him, what makes you think you're even qualified to be a candidate for governor?
So the candidate to your right who voted for Act 77, is he eligible?
Well, frankly, my candidate to the right last week dropped out of the race. In a couple hours, he re-entered the race. So my beef is with Mastriano because he's an absolute fraud. I hold every Republican that voted for it accountable. I've called him Jake the Snake Corman in the past. He knows that. But I also call the other guy Doug Malin Mastriano because they all voted for it. But Mastriano's a fraud because he acts like he's the savior when he's part of the problem.
Senator Corman, since he did refer to you by give you 30 seconds to respond to that.
Well, look, I mean, we voted for it because we were trying to expand opportunities for people to vote. And as Republicans, we shouldn't be afraid of that. The problem was Governor Wolf using unconstitutional measures, not passed by the legislature, to create in the drop boxes, to get rid of all the signature verification, to get rid of poll watchers. He took all the security measures away from that process, which then spoiled the process of the mail-in ballot. So we should get rid of it all because of what Tom Wolf did.
Charlie Giroux, you can ask one of your opponents a question.
I would ask all of the candidates who are not here tonight, where the heck are you? Why are you not here? Why aren't you facing the people of Pennsylvania? Why aren't you allowing
No applause, please. Go ahead. I said no applause to the audience.
Oh, I thought you were telling me to hold.
No. Go ahead, Charlie.
And I think there's a certain amount of disrespect, Scott, to you who have put this event together and to all of the Republican voters in this primary by not being here tonight. As I said in my opening remarks, I have no fear of debating anybody who's on the ballot at any time, at any place. That's the way we're going to beat Josh Shapiro. If we can't take on each other, how in the heck do we think we're going to be able to handle Josh Shapiro in the fall?
Melissa Hart, question for one of your opponents.
Well, I was going to go after the same folks that Charlie did.
Well, go ahead and do it again.
And I think for the same reason, but I can add on to that. Look, we're all candidates. Unfortunately for some of us, we aren't wealthy. And so it appears as though some candidates believe that they don't need to come to public forums and answer questions from the press, that their communication with the public is spending millions of dollars putting out commercials that basically make up a narrative that they can't defend in front of the public.
Enche Zama, do you have a question for your opponents?
Yes. I'm asking the organizers of the next debate if they truly believe that they live in a democracy, if an entity that from out of town can determine who gets on the podium and who becomes the governor in a democracy, the seat of democracy, the seat of freedom, Pennsylvania. And I've been excluded from that stage, a guy who saved lives for decades, and a guy who won the most caucuses north of I-80.
Time. Jay Corman, question for any of your opponents.
Sure. Let me ask Dr. Zama a question. You know, I filed a lawsuit against Tom Wolf's mask mandate and won because he didn't have the authority to do it. Now we're seeing the city of Philadelphia, who's already being devastated by crime, develop their own mask mandate starting today, I believe. Dr. Zama, what is the scientific knowledge, reason to put masks on people?
With a PhD in chemistry and management degrees and an experience in healthcare across the globe as a humanitarian and as a physician in this great state and a surgeon, I still have to scratch my head till I expose my brain to find something that explains why we need masks and why our children are dying in droves because they were forced to wear masks, why our mothers are dying from mental illness. There's no scientific basis of it. It's a political imperative that satisfies special interests.
So, Dr. Zama, are you saying that you know more, or that somehow your knowledge, the CDC, Anthony Fauci, those advising the presidents that have said that masks were, and you know, the research has shown that areas that had mask mandates or where more people wore masks, that the transmission rates were lower?
I would say yes.
Let me share something with you. Right now in Philadelphia, there's a policy, a mask policy. Why doesn't it apply here in Gettysburg? Why is it not applying in Washington, D.C.? If this was truly a concern, a virus that begins here in Gettysburg winds up in Los Angeles tomorrow. It just goes to say people are confused, and that's what the problem has been, these mixed messages. There's no science, quote me, right now, that says you will save lives by wearing those masks.
Well, I think that there are some people who disagree with you, but we're going to move on a little bit. Charlie Giroux, another lightning round question. Marijuana. What is your position on legalizing marijuana for recreational purposes in Pennsylvania? 30
Real
seconds.
quickly, when medical marijuana first became an issue, I was one that said we should pass it. I took a lot of flack for that, Scott, as you know. Today, legalization or decriminalization of recreational marijuana is an issue. I have said, I'm not going to make an issue out of it in this campaign, but if a bill came to my desk, I would sign it.
To legalize?
Yes.
Okay. Melissa Hart.
I would not. I do not support legalizing recreational marijuana. Too many physicians and also psychologists have talked about it being a gateway drug, which it is. But I think a larger concern that I have about government continuing to involve itself in making money off of things that, in my opinion, and in many, the opinions of many in the medical field, harm people, is not the way for us to go. And the motivation of the senators who want to legalize it is so they can get more tax money from people, and it's inappropriate.
Dr. Enche?
It's been shown that marijuana use can be beneficial to people with terminal disease, for example, malignancies. And under those circumstances, I understand. But our focus in healthcare should be our children who are dying from suicide without access to proper care. Our mothers who are dying now from excessive incidences of mental illness as a result of mismanagement of the COVID virus. People up there in Sullivan County who have no access to healthcare, they live in pharmacy and hospital deserts, yet we spend time talking about marijuana. Please.
Time. So I just want to clarify, you would not sign a bill that would legalize?
Marijuana for medical use, yes. For recreational use, we need to be focusing on excellence among our children in the schools in Pennsylvania.
Jay Corman?
As the majority leader, I got the medical marijuana bill passed. I think it was the right thing to do at the time, and still do. I'm 100% against decriminalization because all you're doing is giving cartels free run to run an illegal product that you haven't legalized. So I'd be 100% opposed to just decriminalization. I've always been opposed to legalizing for recreational use. Maybe it's because I have teenagers, but it's something I never really felt comfortable with. If the legislature passes such a bill, I'd certainly sit down and talk to them about it, but something that I've never been comfortable with.
Okay, so again, just want to be clear. You have a long record of saying that it is something that wouldn't even be considered in the Senate. Yeah. Are you saying now that you would consider it?
When you have people like Senator Mike Regan, who's a good friend of mine, who's got a career in law enforcement, come to you and say, I think there's a reason to do this, you listen. Look, I was against medical marijuana until someone educated me on the issue, and I ultimately helped get it done. So no, I am not for it, and I certainly wouldn't lift a finger to try to help it, but I listen, as a governor, you listen. And you listen and you hear the opinions of it, but someone would have to do a whole lot of convincing to get me there.
Joe Gale, legalization of marijuana.
Instead of having more drugs on our streets, government should get drugs off our streets. We need law and order. We need to crack down on the drug crime. We need to secure our southern border where deadly drugs like fentanyl pour over the border every day. And the last thing we need when we're facing an epidemic where people are dying is to legalize recreational marijuana. There's medical marijuana where there's physician oversight, requires a prescription. To legalize a gateway drug that's proven to lead to many other deadly drugs is a bad decision. We need drugs off our streets, and I'll back law enforcement to make sure that happens.
Okay, let's move on to our other questions, and these are the questions where you have 60 seconds to answer. Evie DeJesus, this question goes to Melissa Hart.
Ms. Hart, Philadelphia has experienced record gun violence and homicides throughout the pandemic. In Pittsburgh, just this past weekend, 5 people were shot, 1 fatally, in 3 different incidents, and 2 boys died from gunshot wounds. Crime and public safety are typically the purview of local elected officials. If elected governor, what specific actions would you take to reduce gun violence?
As a state senator, I opposed having different gun laws in different municipalities, and I will continue to oppose different municipalities having different gun laws. The Commonwealth has currently what I believe is reasonable as far as firearms. I think that there's an emphasis that's inappropriate on the gun and a de-emphasis or apparently a throwing up your hands and saying we can't do anything with young people who seem to be always acquainted with and mostly illegal firearms in very volatile situations, often involved in gang violence and other issues. We have a societal problem of young people and violence. The problem isn't guns. In fact, if you look at registrations of firearms, it's not the legal firearms that are involved in these crimes for the most part. So it's important for this state to look at reality and not look at some fantasy where claims are made that if we make guns illegal, then we're not going to have the terrible kind of violence that we saw this weekend in Pittsburgh.
Time. Dr. Zama?
Crime is extremely important and should be to all of us in this room because crime is like a virus. If it starts somewhere in south of Philadelphia, it will wind up in the steps of any house in Punxsutawney. And over the years, we have taken the wrong approach to addressing crime. We've not taken a holistic approach for sustainable results. That's what I will do as a governor. The social determinants of crime, we need to address those. We can't avoid them and stick our heads in the sand. Poverty, drugs, unemployment, poor educational systems, where half of black men who quit high school wind up in jail. That until we address that, these social ills, will we be able to get a control of crime. What am I going to do as a governor? One, I will set up citizen councils in all those communities that are high crime communities and involve community leaders and religious leaders. We have to seek sustainable solutions. Make sure that kids have vocational schools to go to. And these socialist policies over the years that have destroyed societies, there comes a time when people just get tired, and these policies need to be terminated.
Time. Jake Corman, gun violence.
We have a crime problem in Pennsylvania, a crisis, and it goes right back to the riots of 2020. When we had cities in this country that were being occupied by violence, destroying private property, destroying the cities, and no one was being held accountable. Everyone just, for political reasons, turned their eye the other directions as well. They're protesting. No, they weren't. They were criminals. And we need to hold people accountable. And now our district attorney in Philadelphia, who leads this charge, a George Soros-funded DA, who doesn't want to hold anybody accountable. So when you don't hold anybody accountable, you get more and more violence. And that's why I've advocated for his impeachment. And I think a trial, an impeachment process in the House and a trial in the Senate is a perfect place to put these policies on trial, because these policies are directly related to the crime problem we're having in Philadelphia and other communities around this state. So we need to stand up to this violence and say it's wrong. I led the charge for criminal reinvestment in Pennsylvania. That process is being hurt because no one's being held accountable in these cities.
To be clear, you're attributing the rise in violence, gun violence in particular, to the protest after the murder of George Floyd.
I'm attributing people not being held accountable for their crimes, and it just grows. If you don't hold people accountable for small theft, it then becomes larger theft. You don't hold them accountable for simple assaults, it becomes larger assaults, become murders. We saw it in Philadelphia. A Temple student was killed because the perpetrator committed the same crime 3 months earlier, and he was let out of jail by Larry Krasner. He wasn't held accountable for his crime. He did it again, and he murdered the next time.
Joe Gale.
The last thing we need is stricter gun control when the liberal left wants to defund police. We need to protect ourselves, our families, and our properties. And to think that that's a topic of discussion in the society we live in is awful. There's people murdered every day, record high level murder rates in the city of Philadelphia, carjackings, total lawlessness. And when the city burned in 2020 because Black Lives Matter rioted and torched police cars and harmed people, I was the only elected official in the state, and I believe the first in the nation, to speak the truth about Black Lives Matter. And I took a lot of heat for it, and I wouldn't back down. I backed the blue. We must have law and order. And to think that they want to strip our guns away and they don't want to fund police is asinine. And if Mayor Kenny and District Attorney Krasner don't want to do their job and want to jeopardize our safety, I would cut the funding from the state level government down to the cities. If they want sanctuary cities, safe injection sites, and lawlessness, well, guess what? They're not getting state and federal tax dollars. Right. That shouldn't happen.
I just want to follow up. Are you equating the protest after the murder of George Floyd and the racial reckoning, as it's been referred to, with the violence? Do you see the points that people have protested that they have made about racial inequities?
I saw city after city across this entire nation have a protest followed by looting, arson, and violence, and that's unacceptable. We need law and order. And Black Lives Matter played a significant role in it, and I said it. And I wish more Republicans had the backbone to speak the truth about Black Lives Matter. What they did was not a positive of our nation, it was a negative. And I had the backbone to say it.
10% of the protests across the country, according to the Washington Post, had violence. I think it was less than that. I think it was closer to 6%.
Well, you know what? You have a lot of nerve, because there's people that died, including law enforcement members of our community that died during those protests. So don't tell me that it was low levels of violence. There was heavy violence. In the city of Philadelphia, there were police cars torched, buildings burnt down, businesses that never can come back because of Black Lives Matter and radicals that should not have done what they did to our city. It didn't help any kind of camaraderie in our society. It destroyed that.
Well, I don't know about nerve, but I was just pointing out what the research showed.
And you should be ashamed of yourself for saying that there wasn't violence at those protests.
I didn't say that.
That's what you said.
No, I didn't.
Yes, you did. Less than 10%. That's what you said.
That means there still was some violence. I didn't say no
Yeah, well,
violence.
there should be no violence. We need law and order. We shouldn't defund police. We need to enforce the law and hold criminals accountable and not go over after law-abiding citizens that aren't part of the problem.
Charlie Giroux?
Let's be very clear, Scott. The violence that you referred to was not caused by law-abiding citizens who happen to own guns. It was caused by the criminal element, and that's where our focus should be. And we need a governor who will do several things. One, use the bully pulpit to, instead of tearing down our police, to respect them, to honor them, and to support them every single day, because our police are at the apex of the public safety model that every governor has to adhere to. And I've said we need to put more police on the streets. Not only don't we defund them, we increasingly fund them, including 1,000 more police officers in the city of Philadelphia. We've got to figure out a way to get around Jim Kenney, though, because I don't trust him to administer that. And when we talk about the root causes of crime, as we heard a moment ago, one thing that wasn't mentioned was the breakdown of the nuclear family. And we've got to focus on that as an element as well and address it, because there is a lot of empirical data to suggest that that leads to violent crime.
Time. All right, on to our next question, Scott Blanchard. And this one goes to Dr. Zama, I believe.
Nchizama, federal officials say that more than 3,000 bridges in Pennsylvania are in poor condition. The American Society of Civil Engineers gives the state's bridges and roads a D+. Now, we talked about this a little bit earlier because some of you brought it up regarding the ARP money, which some of you also pointed out is not recurring money. So the question would be, how would you address and finance fixing that infrastructure and doing upkeep on that infrastructure in an ongoing way, not just for those of you who would look at ARP money for that, but in the ongoing upkeep of and repair of infrastructure in Pennsylvania?
I'm going to be the governor that modernizes Pennsylvania, and in many ways modernizes the thinking of leadership in Pennsylvania. We're not a poor state. We're an $800 billion GDP economy. And if we were a country, we would be number 18 or 19, depending on the vagaries of global commerce. We're not poor. We're mismanaged. I'll be the governor that takes politics out of PennDOT and injects humanism back in it. And I will make sure that all our bridges, because that's important safety for all of us in this room and the rest of us across this great Commonwealth. I'll make sure that we have sustainable programs to address our bridges and to be sure that they stay safe, they remain safe for us and the future generation. And I will also trim a lot of fat in the federal government. Efficient management of your tax money, the people out there in the rural areas, to be sure that the money's spent right.
Jay Corman?
What I wouldn't do is toll bridges like Governor Wolf is proposing. Now, this is how ludicrous his plan is. He's going to toll the South Bridge in Harrisburg. I-83, PennDOT just put a bunch of millions of dollars into I-83 to expand it, to keep traffic moving better so they don't go through the back roads. Well, now once he tolls the South Bridge, what are they going to do? They're going to go through the back roads to avoid the toll. What I would do is, again, move the state police funding, $650 million, out of the motor license fund into the general fund. And then that will free up dollars we can put towards fixing bridges around the Commonwealth. Again, we're in a position we can do that now. That's what we should do. Fund the state police fully, if not increase it significantly to get more cops on the street, which is extremely important. But take that out of the motor license fund, which was an Ed Rendell idea to spend more money. Let's get it out of the motor license fund so that our infrastructure dollars go towards infrastructure and not toll bridges where you're just moving traffic off the highways and into the back roads and causing bigger problems there.
But there's something that comes along with that, Jay Corman, and that is that there are many municipalities in Pennsylvania, or many might not be the right word, but there are municipalities in Pennsylvania that are eliminating their local police departments and relying on the state police for patrol. Governor Wolf has proposed this several times. Members of the legislature proposed trying to come up with a way to replace that funding that is coming from the transportation fund. How would you do that?
Well, you're mixing apples and oranges here. The state police, he's using it to charge municipalities for state police use who don't have local police. That's wrong too. And if you want to do that, fine, but then do it by who's using the state police. because it's not rural townships in my district. What it is Philadelphia uses the most state police. So why are you going to charge my townships for something they're barely using, while cities like Philadelphia are using it significantly? So again, take the motor license fund, take the dollars out of there, put it in the general fund, and allow the motor license fund infrastructure dollars to go to infrastructure.
Philadelphia does have a large contingent of state police,
Well, of course.
but there are many rural municipalities in this state, I think it's like 40%, that use state police for
Yeah, and they
patrol.
have very
In fact,
few calls.
one in Montgomery County, one of the largest townships in the state. So someone has to pay for that state police patrol.
If you want, which I think is a mistake, but if you want to go down to a municipality use of state police, fine. Then charge the municipalities by who uses the state police. Trust me, a lot of my rural townships, Snowshoe Township in Center County, don't use the state police very often. They don't have a local police force, and guess what? They don't have a lot of crime, so there's not a lot of state police. So why are they going to charge them a big amount and not charge some of the cities that have local police and use state police far more? So if you want to go down that road, which again I oppose, at least do it by who's using the state police, not by some arbitrary number.
Joe Gale?
I believe in limited government, but a core function of government should be maintaining our infrastructure. And we, by far, have the worst roads in the entire country. There's potholes everywhere, bridges closed, yet we also lead the nation in the highest gas tax, 58 cents per gallon. And that gas tax was given to us with a Republican governor, Tom Corbett, along with the Republican State House and State Senate. And that was the legacy of the Corbett administration, and that let down so many conservatives that he was unable to get reelected in 2014, and that's how we ended up with Tom Wolf. I blame having Tom Wolf on the Pennsylvania gas tax given to us by Republicans. We do not have a revenue problem, we have a cost problem. And prevailing wage reform would get to the root of the problem. What that would do is open up the bid process to more independent contractors, generate competition, and drive down the cost of these construction projects. But instead, the politicians in Harrisburg are too worried about catering to labor and trade unions that are big campaign donors. We need free markets, competition, get down the costs, and fix our roads.
Charlie Giroux?
Well, you point out the problem very well. We not only have lousy roads with lots of potholes, we have bridges that are not only substandard, but some are now weight restricted, which means that they're in jeopardy of collapsing, and we had a collapse not that long ago. And that's simply unacceptable. We have to have not only public safety, but the benefits to our economy, which come from goods and services being able to be delivered on time and safely. So the answer that I gave to the very first question tonight, Scott, is at the heart of it. To use that money that's coming from the feds for a one-time use for a rollback of the gas tax. Let me tell you, there's a candidate who isn't on the stage tonight who's saying he's going to reduce the gas tax permanently and drastically, cutting it by 50%. Does anybody really believe that that's workable? That a $2 billion cut is somehow going to be made up with magic dust coming out of the sky, and that the local governments that are taking $600 million a year out of the motor license fund are somehow going to find a magic solution to that 50% cut to them? No. Gimmickry doesn't work. Real answers, real solutions do.
Melissa Hart? 60 seconds.
One of the problems that we have with funding of roads is our gas tax is only levied on the people who drive cars that take gasoline. So that being a kind of poor source now that so many people are driving electric cars, we need to identify a different source that actually falls on everyone who drives a vehicle, because they're all causing damage to the roads and requiring that maintenance. So I would be looking for a source that is more equal. We also, by the way, get a significant amount of money from the federal government anyway, annually, to deal with our roads and bridges. And we need to work together more efficiently with our regional agencies to identify projects that need that maintenance, not new, no more new construction. We need to focus on maintaining our roads in a safe manner. We also, I agree with Joe about the prevailing wage. We need to focus on hiring contractors that are good and are ready to do a project based on merit, not based on whether they comply with prevailing wage.
Time. I do want to follow up, though. You said we have to find another way, something to replace the gas tax, which is absolutely correct. I mean, I know in the legislature, this is something that's coming down the road. Some of the suggestions have been a mileage tax, motorists charged by the miles that they drive, tolls, another way. What would you suggest?
Yeah, I'm totally opposed to tolling anything more than the turnpike. It has become untenable for anyone who's in sales or trucking to actually run a business in Pennsylvania, and it becomes more and more targeted at the people who are producing, and that's completely inappropriate. I don't mind the exploration of a mileage tax or some kind of issue that focuses on those as a user tax. But I also think that we are missing the point that there's still a lot of government money that already goes to maintaining roads. For example, from the gas industry, there's impact fees that go to municipalities. What are they using those monies for?
All right, let's move on to another question. Evie DeJesus, and I believe you were starting with Jay Corman.
Senator Corman, the State House recently passed legislation barring transgender student athletes from competing in women's sports. Proponents say the measure protects athletic opportunities for young women. Governor Tom Wolf calls such measures discriminatory, saying they would deny opportunities to certain children. How would you handle a bill banning transgender students from participating in school clubs that align with their gender identity?
Well, again, I've had a long history with the NCAA, so I blame this whole problem on them. Because they didn't do their research, they didn't figure out what was fair, what wasn't fair, and they just sort of carte blanche set standards together, which unfortunately led to a very large competitive disadvantage. The IOC, the International Olympic Committee, did a much better job of this, and you didn't see the competitive disadvantage. So I don't fault Penn University, I don't fault the student, the athlete who tried to compete or did compete. I fault the NCAA for setting up unfair standards. So look, we should find a way for everyone to be able to compete. But we got to do it fairly, and it's got to be fair to everyone, not just being allowed to compete, but to compete fairly. There are differences between men and women. There are differences in lung sizes, different in heart sizes, things of that nature. So whatever, look, and I'm not a scientist, I'll leave this to Dr. Zama, but whatever it is, the NCAA messed it up, as they do most things, and we got to set up a system that's fair so everyone can compete.
So you would not sign legislation?
Oh, look, we passed a bill in the House, in our committee to do the same thing. I think Governor Wolf's wrong. He's being discriminatory against other athletes who had to compete against this particular athlete. I'm saying there's a way to find a fairness in this. The NCAA didn't do it, and I think the legislation that was passed was correct, and I would sign it.
Mm-hmm. Joe?
Quite honestly, I've had enough of wokeism, cancel culture, radical liberalism, transgenderism rammed down our throats. It's ridiculous. And we need conservatives with a backbone. And I'll tell you what doesn't help this situation. The last gubernatorial nominee we had in Pennsylvania back in 2018 was a state senator at the time, Scott Wagner, who actually co-sponsored the transgender bathroom bill in Harrisburg. So that doesn't help our cause. We need to protect people. And the last thing we need is men playing women's sports. Under my watch as governor, men will not play women's sports. I will protect everybody's rights, but if you're a man, you play male sports. If you're a woman, you play female sports. And the fact that this is even a topic on a debate stage for the candidacy of governor is mind-boggling.
So just to follow up, you're talking about the sex assigned at birth.
Excuse me?
You're talking about the sex assigned at birth when you say men.
Yes, your sex is assigned at birth.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Charlie Giroux?
Yeah, I once upon a time was an athlete, and I, as a high school student, thought I was a Division I star. Couldn't find any coaches that agreed, so I went up the road and played against Gettysburg College from time to time. But later, I coached sports, coached basketball in particular, and my last stint was coaching women. AAU athletes, elite young ladies who are going to get Division I or Division II scholarships. And I realized that because you play basketball with 5 people, if you put a biological male or 2 onto that court, you're taking 1 or 2 women off the court and you're putting them on the bench. Simultaneously, you're taking 1 or 2 women off the bench and completely excluding them from the program. That is fundamentally unfair. It is wrong. And bluntly, common sense alone suggests that biological males should not be playing women's sports.
Mm-hmm. Melissa Hart.
Title IX actually adds education and sports in schools as part of what is protected for women. Being the only person, I think, up here on the stage who played women's sports, I believe I'm an expert. So I played basketball in high school. I was a 5'10" center. If a man decided he wanted to play and he was 6'4", I was going to be on the bench. The experiences I had playing scholastic sports, interscholastic sports, were really invaluable, and I think most women who played would agree with me. You learn how to win, how to lose, you learn how to be a teammate, you learn how to be part of an effort and to work hard and prepare. Those are invaluable experiences in life. If women are pushed out of those experiences because of men who also want to play on the women's team, I think it's just unjust. One of the points that I want to make, though, quickly, is that if we don't follow Title IX, I think we're going to see some challenges of men playing women's sports as a result of the violation of Title IX.
Dr. Zama.
I admire my colleagues for their athletic prowess. I had none. I have no rhythm in my lower extremities against popular folklore. And I believe in freedoms and liberties. But I believe also that gender, as a scientist, is biology. And the gender at birth is the gender you need to carry through your life. Whether you perform plastic surgery and alter your anatomy, you're still fundamentally biologically and physiologically male or female. And we're taking healthy children and we're turning them into lifelong patients. The highest incidence of suicide in our children is among the transgender children. I say this not to curse the darkness, to light a candle. We need to provide resources to address those urges or situations that lead them to consider that. And I will not support any legislation that would allow a transgender to perform in a sport that is contrary to their sex at birth.
Thank you. We're coming to a close to the end of the 2022 Pennsylvania in the Spotlight Republican candidate for governor debate. Now, each candidate will have 30 seconds to make a closing statement, and we'll go. Joe Gale, I think it's your turn to lead off, isn't it?
I guess so.
Okay, 30 seconds, Joe.
So I believe we're desperately in need of young blood in the conservative movement. And I'm the youngest candidate running for governor. In fact, I believe the closest to my age is 20 years my senior. So God willing, I have a long shelf life in public life. And I view myself as the future of conservatism in Pennsylvania. And what makes me unique is the party establishment has absolutely no control over me. I'm an independent, common sense conservative that's registered Republican. And that gives me the ability to actually deliver results as your next governor. Because of gerrymandering the district maps, the Republicans will maintain is my time up?
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
I thought we had a minute.
No,
they can't control me. I'm very proud of it, and I'd be honored to have your vote on May 17th.
Well, we're going to control you with 30 seconds. Here, Charlie Giroux, go ahead.
Scott, I'm the oldest, and I won't use my opponent's youth and inexperience against them at any point during this campaign.
Somewhere I've heard that before.
I'm running for governor because I believe we're in a battle for the heart and soul of this nation. And I believe those battle lines come right through Pennsylvania this year because we have an opportunity to reject the big government, big spending mandates of Josh Shapiro and Tom Wolf and choose a far different course. I'm the candidate to do that because I'm an outsider who knows what's going on inside, because I'm a businessman that knows how to run things like a business, and because I'm a patriot who's not afraid to fight.
Melissa Hart, 30 seconds.
I'm the best candidate here on the stage, and even considering the people who were too scared to come tonight, because I'm the one who can win in the fall, and because I'm the one who is most prepared to do the job, having been a state senator, having been a U.S. representative, by the way, elected all the 6 times from Democrat-registered majority districts. So I know how to build coalitions, how to work with people. I respect the legislature and want to work with them on an agenda that'll be for positive change in Pennsylvania. We need the opportunity to grow here. We need our young people to have an education that will provide them an opportunity to succeed in their lives.
Dr. Zama? A compassionate, conservative, critical thinker. I can win in November. I can grow this party. And it's very important. We have lost the past 2 gubernatorial races, crushed by 17 points, even though somebody spent $17 million. I can grow this party. I'm a scientist. I'm a cardiac surgeon. I understand stress. I have been dealing with life and death situations. I can take this state with a high-performance team to the highest level of excellence that the people deserve.
Time. Jay Corman.
To have free communities, we need safe communities. And we talked a little bit about it today, and that's why I'm such a strong supporter of our men and women in uniform, our policemen. And that's why I'm so honored that the statewide Fraternal Order of Police recommended my candidacy in this Republican primary today. If I could think of all the organizations I'd want support from or endorsements from, it would be the Fraternal Order of Police, the state policemen. They're our heroes. They're the ones who build our communities. If we're going to rebuild some of our communities, we need safe streets first. We're not going to be able to attract people to come and live in Pennsylvania and invest in Pennsylvania if we don't have safe communities. So I'd ask you to follow their support and support my campaign. Thank you very much.
I'd like to thank our candidates for their participation and the organizing sponsor of tonight's event, Spotlight PA, in partnership with sponsors also Spotlight PA, the Philadelphia Inquirer, the Trib Live, Penn Live, WITF, PCN, and the Eisenhower Institute of Gettysburg College. Now, a reminder that Spotlight PA and partners will be hosting back-to-back Pennsylvania U.S. Senate primary debates for Democrats and Republicans at 7 p.m. April 25th and 26th at Dickinson College. The Pennsylvania primary is scheduled for May 17th. Thank you for joining us tonight. Have a good night.
Good evening, everyone. You've been watching live coverage of a debate with Republican candidates running for governor of Pennsylvania. And now that you've heard from the candidates, we'd like to hear from you. Our guests are Jim Cawley, former lieutenant governor of Pennsylvania, and Christopher Nicholas, president of Eagle Consulting. Chris, we'll start with you. What about this evening's debate jumped out at you?
Well, I thought it was a very lively debate. I was